Welcome back. This is episode 2 of AFSOC Unfiltered, the thing that we believe is going to be a video podcast of sorts, depending on if there's any material here worth keeping. I'm Lieutenant General Gen Slife, the AFSOC commander.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Myron Chivis, recently graduated squadron commander, waiting to PCS.
Okay. So in the last episode, we talked a little bit about the value of diversity, how leaders can listen and learn in order to help them be better leaders, and why it's important for folks to have difficult conversations, kind of being willing to talk about things in the workplace that are affecting our airmen. And right now, obviously, a very topical event is racism. Both individual but also structural racism in American society, in the Air Force. And we talked a little bit about how this has just historically been a forbidden topic in the workplace, and we haven't really been willing to have these conversations. But we talked about how important it is for us to have these conversations. And it's not comfortable, Myron. A lot of times people aren't ready to jump into something that heavy in the workplace. And you and I have obviously been having this conversation, kind of over about a 10-year period. So I thought, maybe in this episode, maybe we could talk a little bit about when you and I met, and the initial dance of getting to know one another and that kind of stuff, and then maybe some of the lessons that we learned from that. So, what do you remember about when we first met?
So the first time we met. And memory is an interesting thing, right? How you remember a situation and how that memory has changed over the years of getting to know you. But the first time we met, I had just come back from a mission command tour in northern Afghanistan, back to Bagram. And I see my name on the board, and next to my puck is a Colonel Slife. And so I'm supposed to be doing the dog and pony show in Afghanistan.
Well, back up a minute. So so what are you doing? Yeah, no, I don't think anybody knows what's your AFSC.
Oh, okay.
So back up.
So I'm a U-28 pilot, so initially started off in B-52s and then joined AFSOC in 2008 as a U-28 pilot. And so this is probably my third or fourth deployment, and I'm the captain that is acting regularly at Hackamish and not concerned with any of this other dog and pony show things. And here I go. I got this colonel that I'm supposed to be flying around, and I was at an interesting place in my life at the time, where I was about to be able to make a decision on if I wanted to stay and if I wanted to get out, my next assignment, and so I was leaning towards looking at other opportunities outside the Air Force at that time. But that's important only because that just leads to some of the things I was thinking about, like how I thought about flying with a colonel in Afghanistan. So I see your name against my puck before we fly, and I asked my squadron commander what it's about, and he's like, "Well, this is an opportunity to have a senior leader, look at and maybe hire one of our airmen, one of the U-28 guys, because at the time we were fairly young, and U-28s weren't quite represented in the front offices of senior leaders." And
so was it you that the squadron commander wanted me to get to know?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. So that was a two parts to it, right? It was like, okay, I'm flying the colonel around to hang out and talk to someone else, but that's okay. And I didn't even take that some kind of way at the time because I was thinking about other things. So I ran into you maybe a day or two prior to the flight in the DFAC, and we kind of talked a little bit. I recognized the name. I had heard some rumors about who you were as a group commander out at Cannon, and my uniform wasn't straight and stuff, but whatever, because I was an aviator and it didn't matter to me. So we flew together, we briefed, we flew together, and a majority of the sortie you're in the back talking to another officer that the squadron commander was trying to put out in front. And then halfway through the sortie, you came up front and we just talked a little bit. And it was an interesting conversation. I was very raw at the time, looking back on it. You asked me things about locations that I wanted PCS to, and I was interested in, and I just wasn't interested in those locations based on, again, what I thought I wanted to do. And then when landed after the sortie, we talked a little bit, and I told you just really how I felt about the Air Force and how I felt about my community. Most were positive, some not so positive. And then my squadron commander pulls me in and says, "Hey, Colonel Slife wants to know if would like you to interview to be his executive officer. He's coming to Herbert Field to be the wing commander in a few months, and he thinks he wants to interview you."
Yeah, so that I had forgotten, or I don't know that I ever knew the part about you weren't the guy that the squadron commander actually wanted to put in front of me. We both know who that is. Obviously, a very talented officer who's doing well in his Air Force career. But I think when I went out, so I was the group commander at Cannon at the time. I knew I was coming to be the wing commander at Hurlburt. It had already been announced and so forth. And I guess at that time, certainly, and then even now, when I look in the mirror, I see myself as a very working class kind of guy. I never had been an aide or an exec. I had never, worked for a general. I'd never, been a speechwriter. I mean, I'd never had any of these kind of jobs that, a lot of people think are, desirable from a career perspective. I've always just kind of been a, fly the line, hack the mish kind of guy is the way I see myself. And so I always kind of had an affinity for blue collar kind of people. And so you were raw. I mean, that's what I remember is you were a little ticked off at the Air Force. You were raw, but I appreciated it because I could see that, hey, here's a talented guy. He's obviously very bright, a little bit disillusioned with the Air Force, and but I can work with that. And so when I came to Hurlburt, to become the wing commander, I absolutely had your name in the back of my mind as somebody I wanted to talk to about coming to work in the wing front office, because I thought it'd be kind of fun to get to know you a little bit, to learn from you, and maybe expose you to a perspective a little bigger than flying the line in a squadron. So I get to Hurlburt, and I needed, the exec was leaving, and so I was going to hire an exec very early in my time as a wing commander. And so I asked the group commanders for nominations, and we'll come back to the point here at the end. But so I get this stack of SURFs and OPRs and all this kind of stuff, and it's all white men is the stack of SURFs and OPRs and records and all that kind of stuff that I got. And so I looked through it, and obviously all very well qualified officers, very talented. I mean, you could tell their records were absolutely superb. But I said, hey, what about Captain Chivas? Can he interview? And I remember the reaction I got was like, wow, Chivas. Sure, you can talk Chivas. Yeah, I mean, that'd be fine. I mean, I don't think it didn't feel to me like it was, oh no, sir, you don't want to talk Chivas. I mean, it wasn't anything negative. It was just, oh wow, didn't even think about Chivas. It was almost like it was something that nobody had thought of before. And so we'll come back to that at the end about the opportunities that people get and how our perspective might affect that. But so we got your name into the stack, and you came up to interview. So tell me about that.
So I wanted to believe when I found out that you had asked for an exec and my name wasn't pushed, I wanted to believe it's because everyone recognized that this was something that I didn't want to do. It was something that wasn't interesting to me. I was a line aviator. I was a guy that still had a lot to prove in the airplane, I felt like. I just upgraded to instructor and sitting on an evaluation upgrade. So these are all things that most aviators aspire to do in their career. So I thought, why would I volunteer to go sit in the front office when I still have some mission left in me? But then when I found out I wasn't, pushed, it kind of rubbed me some kind of way, and I don't know what it was. And I think that maybe it's the competitor in me, just to know that I hadn't, that I wasn't, being nominated. So I still didn't want the job.
Did it cross your mind that it might have had something to do with race, either directly or indirectly?
Initially, no, it didn't. I don't want to say naive, because I still don't know that it did, but I tried not to use or think about that or consider that as being a reason. I really wanted to believe it was my desire, the desire that I had shown not to want to be an exec was the reason why I wasn't pushed there. But I held true to not wanting to do it. So when I showed up for the interview, I remember another officer leaving your front office in service dress, which I was told was the uniform of the day. But I wore a flight suit. And the reason why I showed up in a flight suit was because it was a job I didn't think I wanted, and I was making a statement like,
sticking it to the man, weren't you?
There it is, like, I'm not going to dress in that silly uniform. I'm an aviator. And I remember you walking out and looking at me and walking right up to me and saying, "I'm glad you feel comfortable in that uniform. Let's have this conversation." And I was like, I thought that's where this was going to end, was you seeing what I was wearing. And it didn't. Somehow you looked right past that, and we had the interview. And in the interview, I remember it almost like it was yesterday. We talked about the Air Force, we talked about U-28s, and then you start talking about what you're looking for in your front office.
Yeah, so one of the things that I did at that point in my career was I always tried to ask a question that was kind of like out in left field a little bit, because I wanted to, number one, I wanted to see if the person I'm interviewing is just going to sit there and nod their head and like, "Oh yes sir, absolutely sir," or whether you're going to go, "Wait a minute, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Because if you're not willing to tell me, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, then you're not helping me too much. And so what was the out in left field question I asked you?
So it was, what if I told you I was going to hire you because you're black? And that took about no time for me to react to that. And so my initial response was, well, that means you're not hiring me because what I've done in the airframe. That means you're not hiring me because I have a degree in physics, computer science. It means you're not hiring me because of getting through pilot training and going to Shepherd and all the other things that I felt like at that point should be considered and were important. Like, I never once felt like I was less qualified than somebody else. I never felt like anyone else that you're going to interview was going to bring more operational credibility than what we were doing in U-28s at that time. And it frustrated me that would be the thing, and that people would view you hiring me as the affirmative action or the hiring the black guy, the token black guy to be in your front office. And I just didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be about that. And for that split second while you let me to rant, that's what I thought you were saying. Yeah.
And of course, the rest of that conversation, once we kind of got through the initial, "Are you kidding me? Is that really why?" Once we got through that, the point of that is that this is one of, when we talk about diversity in the workplace, this is one of the places where this conversation always seems to get derailed, but as people are talking about it. When leaders are filling out their team, I think that they need to be looking, like we talked about in the last episode, we talked about the cube and the different perspectives. Those different perspectives come from a whole bunch of different areas: race, gender, religion, first language, whatever it is. All those things contribute to the diversity of your team. And so I've found a lot of value in, because I come from an operations background, not having a lot of operations people around me, because I have a pretty good sense of the ops perspective. And so if you'll remember when we worked together at the wing, we had somebody in our front office from a support career field. We had some maintenance representation. We had somebody from the medical group for a while. And so these different perspectives that people brought to kind of our front office team was really important. In the same way, when I serve in joint environments, I find that the most valuable part of serving in a joint organization is the perspectives that each of the services bring. And so when I serve in a joint organization, I'm an unapologetic airman, because if I'm busy trying to be a soldier, then I'm denying that joint organization the airman's perspective. And so we have to, everybody has to contribute what they have. And so as we went through the hiring practices there, obviously you're a black man and we're here talking about race, but that's not the only aspect of diversity that we're looking for. I can look in your record and I can give your, like I'm sitting on a promotion board, I can score records, but I don't know that, the prettiest record is necessarily the same thing as the person that's best qualified for a job, right? And so the conclusion I've come to is this is a trap. There's actually no such thing as a best qualified person. There are well-qualified people who all have different background, skills, experiences, abilities, etc. And as a leader, you should be bringing people onto your team that can fill out your team. You should, you're trying to. I heard a boss of mine one time said, "Hey, I'm trying to build a Super Bowl winning team, not a Pro Bowl winning team." And if you're hiring the people with the prettiest records, that's kind of the Pro Bowl winning team that you're trying to build. But actually, if you want to win the Super Bowl, you got to have people that are good at every position on the field, right? You're looking, to build a team with chemistry that can rely on each other and that kind of stuff. So, I think the key takeaway, and I hope as you and I got to know one another after that kind of rocky start, I hope that what you found was that we were trying to build a team, and there's no such thing as somebody that's best qualified. You were well qualified for that job, but I don't know what it means to be best qualified. But you were well qualified for that job, so ended up bringing you on board.
And you told me all those things in that interview, right? And it's amazing how you've repeated that piece years and years down the road. We're almost 10 years since that event or since that interview, and I've heard you repeat that message, refine it and repeat it, refine and repeat, like, for years. And you did that in the interview. And when you said those things, when you explained yourself after that question, my entire perspective, it's crazy to say it, my perspective on the organization, Air Force, AFSOC and specifically, changed. That somebody got it. They're listening, and I could listen to and can give me and challenge my perspective on what was going on. And I knew that if I could learn that much in a half hour to an hour interview, that spending an hour to 10 hours a day in the front office could be good for me. And then down the road, as you went to hire other execs, it was great to be able to sit in the room and watch your interviews and watch you ask similar questions to different people and their reactions to it. And I would sit back and just wait so I could see the reaction, and I get it, and I understood, and I understand, and it was neat to see that so many people had the exact reaction that you're describing. Like nobody wanted to be the token hire or feel that way. No woman wanted to feel like they were sit in that seat because they were a woman. Every white guy that you interviewed didn't want to be, like you described, not hired because they're white. And you've had the gamut of execs, so that was an awesome experience for me.
Yeah, when I so back to the kind of the beginning of the story, so you weren't on the slate of people that came to me in the beginning, and so I've thought a lot about. So why is that? What? And I've heard people say, and I believe it's true. Ducks tend to pick ducks. Ducks. We when we're hiring people, when we're hiring squadron commanders or picking execs or whatever, I would say more broadly, when we are looking for people that we believe have high potential, when we're looking for people we believe have high potential, we tend to gravitate, and I think it's very subconscious. I mean, there probably are, outright racists and bigots in the Air Force. I know there are. I've looked at the, AFSOC military justice statistics, and I know that we've prosecuted people for outright racism. So I know those people are in the Air Force, but I choose to believe that that's not the majority of the impediments that, in your case, a black man might have in the Air Force. A lot of times, I think it's very subconscious, and when we are thinking about who in our organization has great potential, a lot of times we tend to think people that remind me of myself have great potential, And so how many times have you heard somebody say, hey, you remind me of a young version of myself, I think you've got a lot of potential, or something like that, right? And so I think, when I get a slate of, obviously high-performing white men, I don't necessarily chalk that up to people trying to suppress the African American man in the squadron that you were in. I think it may just be, hey, that squadron commander, we use the example in Afghanistan. The person that I was on that airplane to get to know was actually, somebody else. It wasn't you. And that person may have reminded the squadron commander of themselves, right? So I think a lot of times the ducks pick ducks thing is a pretty powerful impediment to the opportunities people get, If I hadn't have known who you were, if I hadn't have pushed on that, I would have been just picking off a slate of people that were all well qualified, but I wouldn't have looked at you, right? So I think, this is one of the listen, learn, lead kind of things that all of us have to pay attention to is just because somebody doesn't remind me of myself, that doesn't mean it's invalid. That doesn't mean their perspective or whatever is invalid. And I think we're going to talk a little bit in another episode about some of your experiences that may have caused a squadron commander to go, yeah, Myron's not our kind of guy, right? So,
and so we haven't talked about this before, but the unconscious picking of ducks. In the black community, there's this consciousness of not picking ducks because of the way that it could appear to the masses, the way it could appear to the rest of the subordinates in the organization. So when I'm going to pick, or when I was going to pick an exec, while I didn't have any black officers to pick from, if I would have picked a black officer, what does that now look like? You know, does it look like favoritism? Does it look like I picked the token black guy? Am I trying to, you know, push somebody because they look like me? And so that's one of those interesting biases that I've seen, that I question sometimes. Because when I see a front office filled with white men, that question never comes up, or it hardly ever comes up, which is, you know, are we only picking white men? Or, but if a black guy picked another black exec, like, it's interesting, like, what that could be looked as.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 in many ways for you as a commander. You know, if you had been making those kind of choices, you know, and it's really for all the hiring decisions you make. I mean, and I think we're going to talk about this in one of the subsequent episodes. We're going to talk about kind of this dilemma that I've never had to face, and that dilemma is that, you know, every time I succeed or fail, I get to just succeed or fail as Gen Slife. You know, I don't have to succeed or fail on behalf of a class of people, right? But you don't get to just be Myron Chivas, right? If you succeed or fail, it's like there's this, you know, pressure that you have because, you know, you're representing African American officers all over the Air Force, right?
Right. Is that your opinion, or is that the opinion of all white people? Because when I speak, it seems like sometimes I have to start off with, you know, I'm not speaking for all black people. You know, like, and the fact that I even have to say that, and I've never heard a white man say that, leads me. It's just another one of those. It's just a thing, and I'm not sure if it's necessarily, if it is, or if it's just a perception, and it's something that I need to work on, or when I'm talking to my white friends, you know, when I'm one of the few black friends that they have, if I have to feel like I have to explain that, hey, we all have different perspectives. Like, not all black people are from Southern California and listen to hip hop, you know, or not all of us are from, I don't know, the South and do country and ride horses. You know, like, black people are different, and so all of our perspectives are different.
Well, that'll be a good conversation when we get to it. But I appreciate you recounting our time together in Afghanistan and kind of those first days working together. In the next episode, we'll have an opportunity to kind of get into some of the heavier conversations that you know have come up as a matter of course during our experience together. So, thanks for taking the time with me, Myron.